And joining me now is global affairs analyst Sam Fateh. He joins me from Washington, D.C., U.S. via Skype. Good to have you join us.
My pleasure.
So let me start off with the comments made by President Biden about President Putin, which is now generating reactions. He has made several comments about President Putin in the course of this war. He has accused him of war crime. He has also called him a butcher. But just while in Poland on Friday, he did say, I'm quoting him now, "For God's sake, this man cannot remain in power." That's generating a lot of reactions. How do you think that this comment lands?
I mean, from the side of the diplomatic perspective, it may sound like to anybody, it will be directly interpreted as if President Joe Biden would like to see a regime change in Moscow, that he is directly calling for either the Russian military to carry out a coup or for some kind of popular protest to happen where the government of Putin would be ousted. Now, that's what it will look like. I usually say, if you know Joe Biden, it's more like off-the-cuff remarks that was not properly thought through or processed. He went off script. Usually, the U.S. president will be briefed before he appears anywhere. He is coached as to what to say, but oftentimes you will see them go off script. Now, unfortunately, with Joe Biden, usually if it goes off script, it's usually a boss like this, and he may not be in a military intervention to have the regime change in Moscow. That would be very difficult. In fact, it would be unbelievable for anybody to think about it right now at such a time. But I don't think he meant it in that way, but that's how it came out. And that is how it's going to be regarded, and that's how it's going to be looked at.
And President Biden has gone off script a lot of times, even when he was vice president to President Obama. Sometimes it really works because he's able to connect with people emotionally. But sometimes, especially at a time like this, it just doesn't work. But do you think that this also suggests that perhaps the U.S.-Russia relations cannot be repaired, at least not while Biden and Putin are in power?
No, it's not that it cannot be repaired. I mean, do we expect it to be at a time where it was like during Bill Clinton's time? I don't think so. I mean, that would be very difficult to achieve now. But do we think moving forward, there would be some kind of amendment? Yes, U.S.-Russia relationship is never going to be what it was, even like, let's say, right after the Cold War. Tensions are so high. So it's going to take a whole generation to kind of balance it, if it will ever happen. I mean, you have two countries with totally two different ideologies, and then you have leaderships with two different philosophies. So it's going to reconcile those. Now, do I think they should be able to collaborate in certain areas in the best interest of their countries? Yes. But do we think that it's going to be, they will ever be an ally? I doubt that. That is not going to happen.
Let's take the reaction coming from the French President Emmanuel Macron, where he warned that the U.S. President was putting ceasefire negotiations between Ukraine and Russia in jeopardy. Now, how do you think that, or what do you think the implication is of that comment is for this war? And how do you think that Putin is going to interpret this, especially now that he is really desperate?
I think that comment pretty much shows the disagreement between the U.S. and its allies as to how this war is supposed to be handled, right? At some point, nobody wants an escalation. And the only reason why nobody's seeking an escalation, and which is also the main reason why there is no fly zone in Ukraine right now, is they don't want direct confrontation with Russia. And they do not want what is going to be considered a third world war. I mean, Europe has come so far. If you look at the destruction that happened during the Second World War, they don't want that to happen anymore. I mean, they want to protect their nations. Yes, they want to protect their economies, yes, but they do not want direct military confrontation with Russia. And everybody is trying to avoid that. Now, obviously, European nations also know that if a direct confrontation with Russia happens, it's not going to be in America. Whatever fight is going to happen would center right in Europe. So they are not looking for an escalation. They do not want an escalation. But Emmanuel Macron's comment is very indicative of how differently the U.S. and most of its European allies want to handle this. Apparently, I mean, I think it's very clear what the European Union is doing is supplying Ukraine with weapons. What everybody is doing is trying to supply them with weapons. But like President Zelensky said, they need more than that too. I mean, they will need fighter jets, if there's not going to be any no-fly zones. So the question is, why is it that these jets, if the Ukrainians are going to fly it, are not handed over to Ukraine? So it leaves others with the theory as to, was Ukraine poked, into a war on behalf of Europe or on behalf of its other allies? Now, I think what is best for Ukraine is now also to look at, what for their leadership would basically be to look at how they can end this war and how they can stop it without any further escalation, if exactly what they need to outturn this war is not handed over to them by the West.
Let me also get your thoughts on the latest coming from President Volodymyr Zelensky, where he is now, he's saying he's prepared to adopt a neutral stance or a neutral status as part of a peace deal with Russia. But Moscow is saying for now, there cannot be that face-to-face conversation between both presidents.
Yeah, so but that is the thing. Ukraine is looking at what they were hoping for militarily is not happening. Okay, it is not the Americans that are dying. It is not the British that are dying. It's not the French that are dying. It is the Ukrainian people that are dying. Look, we always say in war there is no winner or there is no loser. The point is you have Russians that are there. Their economy is suffering. But you have Ukraine being bombarded, their infrastructure and everything destroyed. It's going to take decades to rebuild to where they are. From the 90s to now, they've been built. Okay, and then there's so. Can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, so they are basically thinking of what they have to do to end this without any more of their people suffering, without their infrastructure getting totally destroyed. Yes, the Russians, after more than a month, have been unable to, embarrassingly, to capture Kiev. That's one thing. That's just one thing. But how significant is that compared to the destruction and the loss of life that have already been going on so far? So again, at the end of the day, what needs to happen here is that they will look for a mechanism or a way to end this war. And what Putin is asking for example, is that they should not join NATO. And then Ukraine is saying that they will take a neutral stand. But now the question is, will Putin trust them enough? Okay, they've already had some of the insurgency problems over in the Donbass region, and there's already so much distrust. What can they do to bring trust? It's going to be very difficult for these two nations, for Ukraine and for Russia, to find trust, to find a common ground. Putin might have an imperialist perspective as to the fact that historically Russia started from Ukraine. So he thinks that they are the same country, they are together, they need to bring them back. Okay, this is like China and Taiwan situation. It's more like a province. It's a country independent of its with their own government. But will they be able to find common ground? It's going to be difficult to find common ground without the trust, and there's absolutely no trust right now between Kiev and Moscow.
Perhaps the diplomatic solution to this war lies in Ukraine and not in Europe or the US. We'll see how things play out in the coming days. Thank you for talking to us, as always. Global Affairs Analyst Sam Fati.
My pleasure.